Welcome back to Audible Archives. I'm Rob, your host, and tonight we step into one of Sherlock Holmes' most haunting investigations. A lonely country estate, a terrified young woman, and a mystery that slithers in the dark. This is the adventure of the Speckled Band, rewritten by Raul and narrated by Rob. A tale where fear coils in silence and death moves without a sound. Before we begin, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because in shadows of Baker Street, every whisper hides a secret waiting to strike. Looking back through my notes, 70-odd cases over 8 years, each one a window into the extraordinary mind of Sherlock Holmes. I find tragedies, comedies, and oddities of every shape, but not a single ordinary affair. Holmes never cared for money. He chose his cases for their strangeness, their intricacy, their flirtation with the fantastic. Yet even among the most unusual of his investigations, few were as bizarre or as chilling as the mystery that engulfed the royalots of Stoke Moran. I might have recorded it earlier, but the woman at the heart of it made me promise secrecy. Only her death, last month, has released me from that vow. And given a wild rumor circulating about the fate of Dr. Grimsby Roylott, perhaps it is time the true events were known. It was early April 1883. I awoke to find Sherlock Holmes fully dressed, standing at my bedside. This in itself was astonishing. Holmes was not often seen before 9. The clock on the mantel showed 7:15. I blinked at him, half surprised and half irritated at the intrusion. "Sorry to wake you, Watson," he said coolly. "But Mrs. Hudson was awakened first. She passed a favor to me, and I'm passing on to you." I sat up. "What is it? A fire?" "No, something more interesting. A client, a young lady, arrived in great agitation, insisting on seeing me immediately. She's waiting in the sitting room. When a young woman wanders London at this hour and shakes people out of bed, one assumes a matter is urgent. If it proves to be a noteworthy case, I imagine you want to follow it from the beginning. So I thought I'd give you the chance." "My dear fellow, I wouldn't miss it for the world." Few things gave me more pleasure than watching Holmes work. His lightning deductions, his icy logic, the quiet brilliance with which he dismantled complex puzzles. I dressed in haste, and within minutes we were descending to the sitting room. A woman dressed entirely in black rose from her seat by the window. As we entered, her veil hid her face. "Good morning, madam," Holmes said warmly. "I am Sherlock Holmes. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson. You may speak before him as freely as before me." He glanced approvingly at the lit fireplace. "Mrs. Hudson has some sense, at least. Come closer to the fire. I'll have coffee brought up. You're shivering." "It isn't a cold, Mr. Holmes," she said in a strained whisper. "It's fear. Sheer terror." She lifted her veil. Her face was ashen and tense, her eyes wide and restless, like a hunted creature. She looked no older than 30, but streaks of premature gray threaded through her hair, and her expression was hollow, exhausted. Holmes studied her in one swift, penetrating glance. "You mustn't be afraid," he said gently, placing a reassuring hand on her sleeve. "We'll untangle this, never fear. You come by train this morning, I see." She stared at him, stunned. "You know me, then?" "No," Holmes said with a small smile, "but I see the return half of a railway ticket in your left glove. You started early, though not without first taking a dog cart along muddy roads." I saw her flinch with astonishment. "There's nothing mysterious about it," Holmes continued. "Your left sleeve is splashed in 7 places with fresh mud. Only a dog cart throws mud in that fashion, especially when one sits on the left side of the driver." "Whatever your reason," she said, "you're correct. I left home before 6, reached Leatherhead at 20 past, and caught the first train to Waterloo." Her voice cracked. "I can bear the strain no longer. I shall go mad if it continues. I have no one to turn to, no one but one person who cares for me, and he is helpless." She swallowed hard. "I heard of you from Mrs. Farintosh, whom you aided in her time of need. She gave me your address." "Oh, Mr. Holmes, can you help me? Can you cast even a sliver of light on the darkness around me?" I cannot pay you now, but in a month or 6 weeks, I shall be married, with control of my own income. I will not be ungrateful." Holmes crossed his desk, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out a small casebook. He flipped through the pages with the ease of a man revisiting old victories. "Fair and Tosh," he murmured. "Ah yes, I remember now. The opal tiara. That was before your time with me, Watson." He looked up at our visitor. "Madam, I'll gladly devote to your case the same care I gave your friend. As for reward, my work rewards itself. You may cover any expenses whenever you're able. Now, please tell us everything, however small. Even trifles matter." A tremor passed through the woman's hands. "Alas," she said, "that is part of the nightmare. My fears are vague. My suspicions rest on the smallest details, things others dismiss as foolish or hysterical." She swallowed. "Even the one person I trust, even he thinks I'm imagining shadows. He doesn't say it, but I see it in his soft answers, in the way he avoids my eyes." Her voice hardened into desperation. "But I have heard of you, Mr. Holmes. Heard of how you see into the wickedness men hide. You may be able to show me how to walk in the midst of the dangers that surround me." Holmes leaned forward subtly, all focus. "I am listening, madam." She drew a slow breath. "My name is Helen Stoner. I live with my stepfather, the last surviving member of the Roylotts of Stoke Moran, one of the oldest Saxon families in England." Holmes nodded. "The name is familiar." Helen continued, eyes fixed on some distant point of memory. "The family was once among the richest in the country. Their estate stretched into Berkshire and Hampshire. But for 4 generations, the heirs were wasteful, reckless. And then came the Regency gambler, who destroyed what was left. All that remained was the old house at Stoke Moran, sinking under a heavy mortgage, and a few acres of bramble-choked land." Her voice lowered. "The last squire lived there a pauper. His only son, my stepfather, saw ruin coming. So he borrowed money from a relative, took a medical degree, and went to Calcutta. There he built a successful practice by sheer force of will." Her hands clenched. "But he had a violent temper. During a series of robberies in his home, he beat his native butler to death. He barely escaped hanging. He served a long prison sentence and returned to England a bitter, dangerous man." She paused, gathering herself. "While he was in India, he married my mother, Mrs. Stoner, widow of Major General Stoner of the Bengal Artillery. My sister Julia and I were twins, only 2 years old at the time." Her eyes glistened. "My mother had a fortune, at least £1,000 a year. She left it entirely to Dr. Roylott while we lived with him, with the condition that a portion each year would be given to us when we married." A shadow crossed her face. "Shortly after we returned to England, my mother was killed in a railway accident near Crewe. After her death, Dr. Roylott abandoned all attempt to practice in London. He took us to the old house at Stoke Moran. The money was enough for our needs. We expected peace." She hesitated, but then a terrible change came over him. Holmes and I exchanged a glance. Instead of reconnecting with neighbors who had initially welcomed a Roylott back to the old estate, he shut himself inside the house. He only came out to start violent quarrels. That temper, that hereditary madness, burned in him like wildfire, made worse by his years in the tropics. Her voice tightened. "There were brawls, disgraceful scenes. Twice he was taken to the police court. He became the terror of the village. People ran when they saw him coming. He is immensely strong and utterly uncontrollable." She twisted her hands. "Last week he hurled a blacksmith over a parapet into a stream. I had to give him every penny I could gather to keep the matter quiet. No one would associate with him, except the wandering gypsies. He lets them camp on our land, and sometimes disappears with them for weeks." She shivered. "He has a passion for Indian animals. He keeps a cheetah and a baboon on the grounds. They roam free, and the villagers fear them almost as much as they fear him." Her voice dropped to a broken whisper. "You can imagine our lives, Mr. Holmes. My sister Julia and I had no servants, no friends, no peace, only fear. Julia was 30 when she died, younger than I am now. yet her hair had already begun to turn white. Holmes leaned forward. "Your sister is dead, then?" Helen Stoner's voice dropped to a fragile whisper. "She died 2 years ago, and it is her death I must tell you about. You can imagine that, living as we did, isolated, surrounded by fear and silence, Julie and I had little contact with anyone of our own age. But we had my mother's sister, Miss Honoria Westphale, who lived near Harrow. Occasionally we were permitted to visit her." She drew a steadying breath. "It was there, 2 Christmases ago, that Julia met a half-pay Major Marines, the man she became engaged to. My stepfather learned of it when she returned. To our surprise, he made no objection. The wedding was set. Julia was happier than I had ever seen her. Her hands tightened in her lap. And then less than 2 weeks before the wedding, the terrible event occurred." Holmes, who had been sitting back with his head resting against a cushion, half opened his eyes and fixed them on her. "Please be precise in your details," he said. "It is easy," she replied darkly. "Every moment of that time is burned into my memory." She continued, "Our manor house is very old. Only one wing is still habitable. The bedrooms are on the ground floor. In order, first my stepfather's room, then Julia's, then mine. Separate rooms, but all opening onto the same corridor." Holmes nodded. "I follow. All 3 windows look out onto the lawn. That night," she shivered, "that fatal night, my stepfather went early to his room. We knew he wasn't sleeping because my sister complained of the strong smell of his Indian cigars drifting through the corridor." Helen's voice softened. "Julia came into my room to talk. She was so excited about her wedding. We chatted until 11, when she rose to return to her room. She stopped at the door and looked back at me." Helen swallowed. "Helen," she said, "have you ever heard anyone whistle in the dead of night?" "Never," I told her. "You don't whistle in your sleep, do you?" "Certainly not." "Why?" She said she'd heard a low, clear whistle the last few nights, always around 3 in the morning. It woke her. She couldn't tell where it came from the next room or from the lawn outside. Helen shook her head. "I've not heard it," I said. "Perhaps the gypsies." "Very likely," she said. "And yet, if it were the lawn, how did you sleep through it? You know I'm a heavier sleeper than you." "It is probably nothing," she said and smiled. Then she closed my door behind her. Holmes leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Do you always lock your doors at night?" "Yes," Helen replied. "Always. With a cheetah and a baboon wandering grounds, we never felt safe otherwise." "Understandable," Holmes murmured. "Go on." Helen's voice trembled as she began the next part. "I couldn't sleep that night. A dreadful foreboding weighed on me. Julia and I were twins. You know how deep the bond runs. And it was a wild night, wind howling, rain lashing the windows." She paused, breath shaking. Suddenly, rising above the storm, came the most horrible scream I have ever heard. A woman's scream. My sister's scream. Her eyes glossed with tears. I leapt from my bed, threw a shawl around me, and ran into the corridor. As my door opened, I thought I heard that same whistle she described, then a heavy metallic clang, as though something had fallen. She clasped her hands tightly. Julia's door was unlocked. It swung slowly open. I stood frozen, terrified of what would emerge. And then Helen's voice broke. My sister staggered out. Her face was ghastly white. Her hands were reaching out for help. She reeled like a drunkard. Helen pressed her lips together, fighting emotion. I caught her. She collapsed in my arms. Her body writhed in agony, terrible convulsions. At first I thought she didn't know me, but then she fixed her eyes on mine and screamed with a voice I can never forget. "Oh my God, Helen!" It was the band, the Speckled Band. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She tried to say more. She pointed, wildly, toward my stepfather's room, but another convulsion seized her. She choked and could not speak again. Helen wiped her eyes. I ran for my stepfather. He came from his room in his dressing gown. Julia was unconscious by then. He forced brandy between her lips. He sent for the doctor, but nothing helped. She closed her eyes, trembling. She never woke again. She died slowly, without uttering another word. Silence filled the room. At last Helen whispered, "That was the dreadful end of my beloved sister." Holmes raised a hand. "One moment. Are you certain about the whistle and the metallic sound? Could you swear to it?" Helen gave a weary, defeated sigh. "That is exactly what the coroner asked me. It is my firm impression that I heard them, but in the midst of the gale, with the old house creaking and shaking, I cannot say with absolute certainty. Perhaps I was deceived." Holmes nodded slowly. "And your sister, she was dressed?" "No, she was in her nightdress. In her right hand they found a burnt match. In her left, a matchbox." Holmes's eyes sharpened. "Which means she struck a light to look around her. That is extremely significant. And what conclusions did the coroner reach?" "He examined every inch of the matter," Helen said. "My stepfather's reputation alone ensured that, but he found no satisfactory cause of death. My testimony proved the door was locked from inside. The windows had old shutters, solid wood, bolted each night with heavy iron bars. The walls were checked, solid. The floors, nothing unusual. The chimney was wide but blocked by 4 iron staples." She swallowed painfully. "So it is certain she was entirely alone when she died, and there were no marks of violence." Holmes leaned back. "Poison." "The doctors searched for traces. They found none." "What then?" Holmes asked quietly. "What killed her?" Helen closed her eyes. "I believe she died of sheer terror. But I cannot imagine what frightened her so." Holmes's gaze drifted toward the fire. "Were the gypsies camped near the plantation at the time?" "Yes, there are almost always gypsies there." "And her reference to a speckled band?" Holmes asked, "What do you make of it?" Helen looked hopeless. "At times I think it was delirium. At other times, some band of people, perhaps the gypsies. They wore spotted kerchiefs around their heads. Maybe that suggested phrase?" Holmes shook his head slightly, unsatisfied. "These waters are very deep. Please continue." Helen straightened herself. 2 years have passed since Julia's death. Until recently, I have lived a life of loneliness. But a month ago, a dear friend, Percy Armitage, second son of Mr. Armitage of Crane Water, asked for my hand in marriage. My stepfather raised no objection. We planned to marry in spring. Her voice faltered. 2 days ago, repairs began on the west wing. A hole was made in my bedroom wall. So I had to move into Julia's old room, into the same bed where she died. Even Holmes stiffened at that. "Last night," Helen whispered, "as I lay awake, thinking of Julia, I heard it. She stared at us, eyes haunted. The whistle, the same low whistle she described. Clear, distinct, in the middle of the night. A chill rippled through the room. I lit the lamp instantly. Nothing. No movement, no sound. But I was too frightened to sleep again. At first light I dressed, slipped out, took a dog car to Crown Inn, rode to Leatherhead, and caught the first train here. I came straight to you." Holmes nodded gravely. "You've done wisely. But have you told me everything?" "Yes," she insisted. "Everything." Holmes's tone softened, but his eyes were unyielding. "Miss Stoner, you have not. You are shielding your stepfather." "What do you mean?" Holmes gently lifted the black lace cuff on her wrist. A gasp escaped me. 5 dark bruises, deep finger-shaped, circled her pale skin. "You've been cruelly used," Holmes said quietly. Helen flushed with shame and covered her wrist. "He is a hard man. He does not always know his own strength." A heavy silence fell. Holmes stared into the fire, fingers pressed together beneath his chin. At last he spoke. "This is a very deep affair, far deeper than we imagined. There are 1,000 points I wish to know before deciding our next move. Yet we have no time to lose." He turned to her sharply. "If we came to Stoke Moran today, could we examine these rooms without your stepfather's knowledge?" "Yes," Helen said. "He mentioned going to town today, on urgent business. He would be gone all day. Our housekeeper is old and easily distracted. I can ensure she does not trouble you." "Excellent." Holmes stood. "Watson, You have no objection to a trip to Surrey? None whatsoever, I replied. Holmes nodded. Then we shall come. Miss Stoner, what will you do? I have errands now that I am in town, she said. But I will return by the 12 o'clock train. I shall be home before you arrive. Holmes smiled. Then we waste no more time. Watson, get your coat. Holmes rose politely. You may expect us in the early afternoon, he said. I have a few small matters to attend to before we leave. Will you not stay for breakfast? No, Helen replied softly. I must go. My heart feels lighter now that I've shared this burden. She lowered her black veil and glided from the room like a shadow retreating from the light. When the door clicked shut, Holmes leaned back in his chair. Well, Watson, he asked, what do you make of it? I exhaled slowly. It strikes me as a most dark and sinister business. Dark enough, Holmes agreed, and sinister enough. If the lady is correct, I continued, and the walls, floor, door, windows, and chimney are all solid or secured, then Julia must have been utterly alone when she died. Holmes steepled his fingers. Then what are the whistles in the night, and the peculiar dying words? I can't imagine, I admitted. Holmes leaned forward slightly, the firelight slicing across his sharp profile. Consider it, Watson. Nocturnal whistles, gypsies on intimate terms with the doctor, a motive to prevent his stepdaughter's marriage, a dying allusion to a band, and that metallic clang Miss Stoner heard, perhaps a shutter bar falling back into place. I believe the clues point along a single logical pathway. But what would the gypsies have done? I asked. That I cannot yet see, and I find many objections to that theory. So do I, Holmes said, which is precisely why we're going to Stoke Moran. I intend to learn whether those objections are fatal or easily explained. He paused, then suddenly sprang upright. But what in the name of... The door slammed open with a violent crash. A massive man filled the doorway like a storm cloud blotting out the sun. His attire was a strange mixture of two worlds, a black top hat and long frock coat, like a city professional, but high gaiters and a hunting crop, like a country squire. He was so tall that his hat scraped the doorframe. His shoulders spanned nearly the entire width. His face, deeply lined, sun-scorched, twisted with long-nursed rage, turned sharply between Holmes and me. His eyes were bloodshot hollows, his nose sharp and predatory. He looked every inch a dangerous animal trapped in human form. Which of you is Holmes? He demanded. My name, sir, Holmes replied calmly. But you have the advantage of me. I am Dr. Grimsby Royal out of Stoke Moran. Holmes smiled politely. Indeed, doctor. Please sit. I will do no such thing. Roylott roared. My stepdaughter has been here. I traced her. What lies has she been feeding you? Holmes said pleasantly. A bit cold for the season, wouldn't you say? What's she been saying to you? He bellowed, stepping forward. Holmes went on conversationally. I heard the crocuses promise well this year. The old man's face darkened into an apoplectic crimson. You would put me off, would you? He snarled, shaking his hunting crop. I know you, you scoundrel. Holmes a meddler. Holmes smiled. Holmes a busybody. His smile widened. Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office. Holmes gave a warm, amused chuckle. Your conversation is most entertaining. Doctor, when you leave, do close the door. The draught is dreadful. Roylott's voice dropped into a low, feral growl. I'll leave when I've said my piece. Do not meddle in my affairs. I know my stepdaughter has been here. I traced her, and I warn you, I'm a dangerous man to cross. Look here. Before we could react, he strode to the fireplace, seized a steel poker, and, without the slightest strain, bent it into a curve with his bare hands. Keep out my grasp, he hissed. Then he hurled the twisted poker back into the hearth and stormed from the room, slamming the door so violently the glass rattled in its frame. Holmes burst into laughter. A most amiable person, he said lightly. I may not be as large as he is, but if he'd stayed a moment longer, I might have shown him that my grip is not much weaker than his. Holmes picked up the work poker. With a sudden, powerful movement, he straightened it as though bending steel were child's play. Holmes laughed softly as he straightened the poker. Fancy as having the insolence to lump me in with the official detective force. Still, this adds a welcome spice to the affair. I only hope Miss Stoner won't pay dearly for allowing that brute to trace her here." He clapped his hands together lightly. "Now then, Watson, breakfast. Afterward, I'm off to Doctor's Commons. There's information I must obtain before we move a single step." It was nearly 1 o'clock when Holmes returned, his coat dusty from the road, a folded sheet of blue paper in his hand, covered with hurried calculations. "I've examined the will of Dr. Roylett's late wife," he said without preamble. "To interpret properly, I had to work out the modern value of the investments. Near as makes no difference. The income that was £1,100 at her death has dropped to about £750 due to falling agricultural prices." He tapped the paper with finger. "Each daughter is entitled to £250 a year on marriage. If both girls had married, our charming doctor would be left with a pittance. Even one daughter marrying would cripple him financially." He folded the paper sharply. "Thus, the man has the strongest possible motive to prevent these unions. My morning has been well spent." Holmes lifted his hat. "And now, Watson, enough delay. The old man knows we're on his trail. If you're ready, we'll take a cab to Waterloo. And please slip your revolver into your pocket. And Ely's number 2 speaks beautifully to gentlemen who bend steel pokers barehanded. That and a toothbrush should be all we need." We caught a train to Leatherhead, and from the station hired a small trap. We drove 4 or 5 miles through the winding Surrey lanes. It was a breathtaking spring day, brilliant sun overhead, fleecy clouds drifting lazily, new green shoots pushing through hedges, and the soft scent of damp earth rising from fields. A beautiful world, indifferent to our grim purpose. Holmes sat in the front seat, arms folded, chin on his chest, hat pulled low, a statue carved from concentration itself. Suddenly he came alive. He touched my shoulder, pointing across the meadow. "Look there." A broad, timbered park sloped gently upward. At its crest, half hidden among thick, old trees, jutted gray gables and high, ancient roofline of a mansion. "Stoke, Moran," Holmes murmured. "Aye, sir," the driver replied. "That be Dr. Grimsby Roylett's house." Holmes gestured toward a scaffold corner of the structure. "Some construction going on. That must be the west wing Miss Stoner mentioned." "There's the village," said the driver, pointing left toward a scatter of rooftops. "But if you're bound for the house, you'll save time going over that stile and across the fields. See there the lady walking?" Holmes shaded his eyes. "And the lady, I fancy, is Miss Stoner." "Yes, we'll take your advice." We paid the driver. The trap rattled back toward Leatherhead. "I thought it best he assume we're here on business, architectural or otherwise," Holmes said, "climb in style. It may spare her some gossip. Good afternoon, Miss Stoner. You see we kept our word." She hurried to us with visible relief, seizing our hands warmly. "I've been waiting so eagerly for you. Everything has gone splendidly. Dr. Roylott is in town, and he almost certainly will return until evening." Her eyes shone with gratitude and hope. "We have already had the pleasure of meeting the doctor," Holmes said dryly. In a few sharp, precise sentences he recounted Roylett's violent intrusion in Baker Street. As Helen listened, all color drained from her face. "Heavens," she whispered. "Then he followed me." "So it appears," Holmes replied calmly. "He is cunning, so cunning, I never feel safe from him. What will he do when he returns?" Holmes's voice sharpened. "He must be careful. He may discover that someone more cunning than himself is now on his track. Tonight, you must lock yourself in. If he becomes violent, we'll see you safely to your aunt's house in Harrow. Now, time is precious. Please take us to the rooms we are to examine." The house at Stoke Moran rose before us like something from a decayed Gothic painting. It was built from old grey stone, spotted with lichen, the central block half ruined, with 2 curved wings stretching outward like the pincers of some ancient stone crab. One wing was desolate. Windows smashed, boards nailed over openings, the roof collapsing inward. The central building was scarcely better. Only the right-hand wing seemed alive, with blinds drawn and blue smoke spiraling from chimneys. Fresh scaffolding clung to one corner. where stones had been punched out, but no workers were in sight. Holmes paced the ragged lawn slowly, hands behind him, studying the 3-bedroom windows with hawk-like focus. "This one was your old room," he said, pointing. "The center belonged to your sister, and now to you. The last is Dr. Roylett's." "Yes," Helen confirmed. "I'm sleeping in the middle one until suppose repairs are done." "Suppose repairs," Holmes echoed. "Interesting, because I see no genuine need for them." "There was none," she said quietly. "I believe he wanted an excuse to move me out." Holmes's eyes darkened. Indeed, very suggestive. He glanced along the outer wall. "On the other side of this wing runs a corridor from which all 3 rooms open?" "Yes, but with very small windows. Too narrow for anyone to pass." "Then, with both your doors locked, you are entirely unreachable from that side." Holmes straightened. "Be so kind as to step into your room and bolt the shutters." Helen obeyed. Holmes leaned into the open window and tried every method imaginable to move the shutter. He pushed, pulled, wedged his fingers along the seams. Nothing budged. There wasn't even a slit that might admit a knife blade under the bar. He examined the hinges with his lens. "Solid iron," he muttered, "built deeply into the masonry." He scratched his chin. "This complicates my theory. No one could have entered through these shutters if bolted." He straightened. "Well, perhaps the interior will speak." A small side door led us into the whitewashed corridor. 3 doors, 3 rooms, 1 terrible memory. Holmes ignored Roylett's chamber entirely and stepped immediately into the middle room. Julia's room. Helen's room now. The room of the horror. It was small, low ceiling, a yawning old fireplace, a brown chest of drawers in one corner, a narrow bed with a white cover in the other, a dressing table beneath the window, 2 wicker chairs, a square of worn carpet. The wooden boards and panels were ancient, worm-eaten oak, dark and discolored, older than memory. Holmes dragged one chair into a corner and sat motionless, scanning the room with a predator's patience, eyes sweeping every inch of wall, floor, and ceiling. Finally, he pointed upward. "That bell rope," he said. A thick rope hung beside the bed, the tassel lying right on the pillow. "Where does it ring?" "The housekeeper's room. It looks newer than the rest." "Yes, it was installed only a couple years ago." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Your sister requested it?" "No, I never heard of her using it. We always fetch what we needed ourselves." Holmes's gaze sharpened just slightly. Something about that bell rope, something about its position, something about its age. He was beginning to see something the rest of us could not. Holmes knelt on the floor with the intense, silent focus of a man dissecting a corpse. "Strange place for a bell pull," he murmured. "Allow me a moment." He stretched himself flat, lens in hand, crawling across the boards like a soldier sweeping for mines. He inspected every crack in the oak, then shifted to the wall panels, his eyes narrowing as he traced the age of a grain. At last, he rose and approached the bed. Something above it had caught him. The bell rope. He gave it a tug. Nothing. Holmes's eyebrows lifted. "Ah, a dummy. It doesn't ring?" I asked, "Not attached to any wire." He tugged again, harder, as if challenging to lie. "Fastened to a hook, directly beneath the ventilator." Helen blinked at it. "I never noticed that before." Holmes's voice dropped to a mutter, half to himself. "A bell rope that doesn't ring, a ventilator that doesn't ventilate into an adjoining room, no less. What builder opens a vent into another chamber instead of the outside air?" "That ventilator is new as well," Helen said quietly. "Installed around the same time as the dummy rope?" "Yes. There were several small changes done then." Holmes's tone sharpened, edged with detection of deliberate design. "Fascinating changes indeed. With your permission, Miss Stoner, we shall inspect the inner room." Dr. Grimsby Roylett's chamber felt colder than the others, as if the air itself recoiled from him. It was sparsely furnished. A camp bed, a shelf of technical books, a battered armchair, a plain wooden chair, a round table, and a massive iron safe dominating one wall. Holmes made a slow circuit, studying each detail with surgical precision. When he reached the safe, he rapped its surface with his knuckles. "What's inside?" "My stepfather's business papers," Helen replied. "You've seen them?" "Only once. It was full of documents." "No cat?" Holmes asked suddenly. She blinked. "Cat? No. Why?" Holmes held up a small saucer sitting on top of the safe. "There's a saucer of milk here." "Oh, that must be for the cheetah or the baboon," she said nervously. Holmes smirked faintly. "A cheetah is only a very large cat, Miss Stoner." He crouched by the wooden chair, scrutinizing the seat with meticulous care, then rose abruptly. "Thank you. That clarifies a point." He turned and his gaze froze. "Now this is interesting." A whip hung from the bedpost, not a simple dog lash, but a length of whipcord knotted into a loop. "What do you make of it, Watson?" Holmes asked. "A lash ordinary enough, but why tie it like that?" "Precisely," Holmes murmured. "A common object made uncommon by intention. When a clever man chooses crime as his craft, heaven help his victims." His face had hardened into something grim and dangerous. "I am done here. Miss Stoner, let's step outside." Back on the lawn, Holmes paced in silence, hands clasped behind him, jaw tense. Miss Stoner and I exchanged uneasy glances. Neither of us wished to interrupt whatever complex machinery was turning behind his narrowed eyes. At last he stopped and faced us. "Miss Stoner," he said quietly, "you must follow my instructions exactly. No hesitation, no deviation. Your life may depend upon it." Her composure faltered. "I, of course. Whatever you say." Holmes nodded. "In the first place, Watson, and I must spend the night in your room." Both she and I stared at him. He lifted a hand. "I know it sounds extraordinary, but let me explain." He pointed toward a low building in the distance. "That in the Crown, from its upper windows, your bedroom could be seen?" "Yes." "Good. Tonight, when your stepfather returns, you must claim a headache and remain in your room. Once he retires, open your shutters, unfasten hasp, and place your lamp in a window. That would be our signal." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Then you must slip quietly into your old bedroom, taking with you whatever you need. Despite the so-called repairs, you can manage one night there." Helen nodded, pale but resolute. Holmes placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Do exactly as I have said," he told her. "And whatever happens tonight, do not be afraid. You are no longer alone." Holmes dipped his head in a small nod as Miss Stoner assured him she could manage to move. "Oh, yes," she said softly. "Easily." "The rest," Holmes replied, "you will leave entirely in our hands." She hesitated. "But what will you do?" Holmes looked toward her room, his expression sharpening like a blade finding its edge. "We shall spend the night there, and we shall discover the source of the sound that has tormented you." Miss Stoner's fingers tightened on his sleeve. Her voice trembled. "Mr. Holmes, you already know, don't you? Please, tell me what killed my sister." Holmes's eyes softened, but only for a heartbeat. "I would prefer to speak when the proof is unmistakable." "Then at least tell me this. Was she frightened to death? Was that what happened?" Holmes shook his head slowly. "No, not fear. Something far more tangible." He stepped back. "And now, Miss Stoner, we must go. If Dr. Roylott returns and finds us here, our entire purpose is ruined. Be brave. Do exactly as I've told you. The danger shadowing you won't last much longer." Holmes and I secured a small bedroom and sitting room on the top floor at Crown Inn. From the window, we had a clear view of the long avenue leading up to Stoke Moran and of the occupied wing of the Manor. As dusk deepened, the world settling into blue-gray silence, Roylott's trap rumbled into view. The doctor loomed like a monstrous silhouette beside the frail boy who drove him. The lad struggled with the heavy gates, receiving only curses and a raised fist for his trouble. The trap clattered onward, and moments later a lone light flared among the trees, a lamp being lit inside the house. Holmes lit his pipe, the bowl glowing faintly. "Watson," he murmured, "I confess I have scruples about taking you tonight. There is real risk in what we're about to do." Can I be of any help? I asked. Your presence might be invaluable. Then I'm coming. Holmes smiled faintly. Very kind of you. I studied him in the dimming light. You spoke of danger. You must have seen something in those rooms that escaped me. Not seen, Holmes corrected gently. Deduced. You noticed the bell rope? Yes, but I can't imagine its purpose. And the ventilator? Of course, though it's hardly unusual to have a small opening between rooms. Holmes exhaled a thin stream of smoke. I knew there would be a ventilator before we even arrived. My dear Holmes. Her sister could smell Roylet cigars. That meant there had to be a link between the rooms. A small one, too small for the police or coroner to think noteworthy. A ventilator. But what harm lies in that? A coincidence of alterations, Holmes said. A ventilator installed, a false core hung by the bed, and shortly afterward, a woman dies in her sleep. Does that not strike you as peculiar? I still don't see the connection. Holmes turned his head toward me, eyes glinting. The bed, Watson. Did you see anything odd about it? No. It was clamped to the floor. Fixed. Immovable. I froze. The bed could never be shifted away, Holmes continued. It must always remain directly beneath the ventilator and that false rope. Holmes, I whispered, I begin to see what you're implying. We are barely in time to prevent something vile. Subtle, Holmes said. Vile and ingenious. When a doctor turns a crime, Watson, he is the most dangerous of all criminals. He has knowledge and he has nerve. He leaned back in the armchair, smoke curling around him like a shroud. But I believe we can strike deeper than he has. He tapped his pipe. We shall face horrors tonight. For now, let us have a quiet smoke and think of something cheerful while we still have the chance. By 9 o'clock, the lone light glowing among the trees at Stoke Moran winked out, plunging the estate into a depth of darkness that felt almost deliberate. 2 slow, heavy hours passed. The wind rattled the shutters of Crown Inn. The world felt suspended. Then, precisely at 11, a single bright square flared to life in the middle window of the Manor. Holmes rose instantly. That's our signal. We left the inn under cover of polite excuse, Holmes telling the landlord we might be gone the entire night, and stepped into the chill road where one small, unwavering light guided us through the gloom. The path into the grounds was almost too easy. The old stone wall had long surrendered to time, chunks missing, gaps yawning wide. We slipped through, moving beneath skeletal branches until the lawn stretched before us, pale in the moonlight. We were nearing the window when something burst from a clump of laurels, a thing that looked like a stunted, twisted child. It hurled itself on the grass, writhing in grotesque contortions, then bolted away into dark with unnerving speed. My God, I gasped. Holmes, did you see that? Holmes, startled, gripped my wrist with surprising force. For a second he, too, seemed shaken. Then he exhaled a quiet, breathy laugh. The household pets, he whispered. The baboon. A cold realization crept over me. The cheetah was still unaccounted for. With hearts pounding, we removed our shoes and slipped inside the bedroom, closing shutters behind us. Holmes moved a lamp to the table, giving the room one last sweeping glance. Everything looked unchanged, innocent even, but the silence pressing on us from all sides. Holmes leaned close, cupping his hand to my ear so his whisper wouldn't disturb the stillness. The slightest sound would ruin us. I nodded. No light. He'd see it through the ventilator. Another nod. And Watson, do not fall asleep. Your life may depend upon it. Keep your revolver ready. I drew my pistol, placing it within reach. Holmes set a thin cane on the bed beside him, then a stub of a candle and a box of matches. After turning down the lamp, darkness swallowed the room whole. What followed was a vigil I will never forget. Total blackness, total silence. Nothing but the rush of my own pulse and the knowledge that Holmes was somewhere close, still, alert, coiled. Outside, a night bird cried. Then at our window, a soft, drawn-out whine, feline predatory. The cheetah, far off. The parish clock told every quarter hour, each strike stretching the night tighter, thinner. Midnight. 1, 2, 3. Still we waited. Then, a flicker, a faint gleam at the ventilator. Gone in an instant. The smell arrived next, burning oil, heated metal. Someone in the next room had lit a dark lantern. I heard the faintest movement, then silence again. But the smell grew, thickened, pressed. Half an hour crawled by. And then, a new sound. Soft, continuous, sinister, like steam escaping gently from a kettle. Holmes moved faster than I'd ever seen him. He leapt from the bed, struck a match, and began lashing the bell rope with furious precision, the cane slicing the air like a whip. "You see it, Watson?" he shouted over chaos. "You see it?" I saw nothing. Holmes, a sudden flare of light stabbed straight into my exhausted eyes, blinding me. I heard a whistle, a sharp, low note, but when I blinked to the glare, all I saw was Holmes, pale as death, striking wildly at the rope as though every lash could save a life. Then he stopped, frozen, staring at the ventilator with a revulsion so deep it hollowed his features. And then, from the next room, a cry, not human, not entirely animal. A sound so raw, so filled with terror, agony, and something like fury, that it ripped to the walls and through us. Later we would hear that it reached the village, the parsonage, even startled sleepers miles away. In that moment, it rooted us to the spot. Holmes stared at me. I stared at him. The last echoes dwindled into the terrible silence they'd sprung from. "What can it mean?" I whispered, barely able to breathe. Holmes exhaled, calm once more, but with something grim beneath the surface. "It means it's over. And perhaps it ended as it should. Take your pistol. We're going to Dr. Roylett's room." Holmes lit the lamp, its glow trembling along the corridor walls as we moved. He struck the doctor's door twice. No answer. He turned the handle. The sight inside will haunt me forever. A dark lantern sat open on the table, its beam fixed on the iron safe, whose door hung ajar. Roylott sat in a wooden chair beside it, his long gray dressing gown draping to reveal bare ankles and red Turkish slippers. Across his lap lay the dog whip, the same with the knotted lash we'd noticed earlier. His head was tipped back, staring upward with eyes glassy and lifeless. His mouth hung slightly open. A yellow band with brown speckles seemed wound tightly round his forehead like some grotesque ornament. Holmes whispered, "The band, the speckled band." I stepped closer. The band moved. From Roylett's hair rose a diamond-shaped head. Its neck puffed a malignant triumph, a venomous serpent uncoiling from its perch. Holmes's voice cut to horror. "A swamp adder, the deadliest snake in India. He's dead, Watson. 10 seconds, that's all it takes." He shook his head, almost sorrowfully. Violence recoils upon the violent. He dug a pit and fell into it himself. Holmes snatched the dog whip from Roylett's lap, looped the noose over the serpent's neck, and held it at arm's length as it writhed. With swift precision, he hurled inside the iron safe and slammed the door shut. Thus ended Dr. Grimsby Roylott of Stoke Moran. There is little need to linger on the aftermath. Miss Stoner's shock when she learned the truth, our escorting her by the morning train to the safety of her aunt's home in Harrow, the official inquiry that eventually declared her stepfather the victim of an unfortunate accident involving his own exotic pet. The final, missing pieces of the case Holmes explained to me as we journeyed back to London. Pieces that revealed just how close Miss Stoner had come to sharing her sister's fate. Holmes leaned back in a railway carriage, fingers steepled beneath his chin, as the countryside flickered past the window in streaks of pale green and gray. "I was wrong at first, Watson," he admitted, almost wryly. "Completely wrong. And it proves, yet again, how dangerous it is to build a theory on incomplete data." He watched the field slide by, thoughts clearly returning to the darkness of Stoke Moran. "The gypsies misled me," he continued. "And that cursed word, band. The poor girl must have seen something. Just for an instant, by the flare of her match. Something round, coiled, speckled. But my mind jumped to the wrong conclusion. The gypsies wore spotted kerchiefs. It fit too easily." He shook his head. "But once it became clear that the danger could not come from window or door, I reconsidered instantly. My attention went straight back to the ventilator and the bell rope hanging directly beside it. His voice grew sharper and more precise, the tone he used when revealing the spines of a puzzle. A dummy bell rope, a bed clamp so it could not be moved an inch. Those alone were enough. The rope wasn't for humans at all. It was a bridge, a pathway. He tapped a finger against the glass. The idea of a snake came immediately. A trained snake. And knowing the doctor's fondness for importing creatures from India, well, the pieces locked into place. A perfect murder weapon, one that left no poison detectable to any chemical test. Only 2 tiny punctures hidden by hair or folds of skin. A slow-eyed coroner would never see them. Good God, I breathed. And the whistle? Of course, he needed a signal to call the creature back before dawn revealed it. Holmes said he'd trained it with milk. That saucer told us as much. When summoned, the snake returned to the ventilator. He leaned forward. He released it at whatever hour suited him. It would crawl down the rope and onto the bed. Whether it bit the first night or the 10th didn't matter. Eventually it would strike. A shiver ran down my spine. Holmes continued, calm but grim. I suspected all this before we entered his room. The chair showed signs of frequent use. He stood on it to reach the ventilator. The safe held the creature when not in use. The whipcord loop was the tool he used to handle it. And a metallic clang Miss Stoner heard? Obvious, Holmes said. He was shutting the safe. Hard, too hard. He paused. You know the steps I took to test my theory. I heard a hiss. The same moment you must have heard the steam-like sound. And then I struck, hard. With the result, I murmured, of driving it back to the ventilator and straight into its master's room. Holmes said, some blows must have landed. Snakes are not forgiving creatures. When it dropped through the opening, it attacked the first living thing it saw. He looked out the window again, the faintest shadow crossing his face. In that sense, Watson, I bear some indirect responsibility for Dr. Grimsby Roylett's death. But he exhaled slowly. I dowel weigh heavily on my conscience. He lifted his eyes toward me. A man like Roylott, who twisted knowledge into a weapon. There was only ever one way such a scheme could end. You just heard The Adventure of the Speckled Band, rewritten by Raul and narrated by Rob. A chilling reminder that the most terrifying mysteries are not ghosts or dreams, but human malice and greed. I'm Rob, your host, and here on Audible Archives, we bring the classics back to life, one heartbeat at a time. If this story left you watching the corners of your room a little more closely, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because the next case will be just as deadly and twice as strange.